Hi, in this video I'll be giving you a brief overview of the PCB design and manufacturing market in India and its current state. But before that, let me give you a brief understanding of what PCBs are and why they are important when we are talking about electronics hardware production and make in India or making the country into a production hub. Alright, so PCBs are basically a platform and a backbone where a designer is designing the entire electronic system. Um, Now, PCBs can be found inside every electronic and tech product, and in most cases, you're going to see a rigid green board or a different colored board on which different components are sitting on, and these components can be like the black rectangles which you see. These are active components like ICs and RAMs and processors, and you can also see some passive components which are the smaller components. So these components all together make up the electronic system, and the designer would need to design a PCB in order to integrate all of the different types of electronic subsystems to make the entire product. So a PCB becomes a key ingredient in every tech product. And whenever we are talking about production, we need to address PCB designing, PCB manufacturing, and all of the different aspects which are dealing with the system end of the thing. Now, the government is pushing for the semiconductor side of things, but semiconductor means that you are only designing this IC, and that is great. But if you need to design the entire product, if you need to manufacture the entire product, you have to design and manufacture the entire PCB. And you may design a very capable IC, but if you place it on a poorly designed PCB, that entire system won't work, and the entire purpose of designing that IC is not being met. So that is another reason why PCB designing and PCB manufacturing is a key aspect of being a successful hardware production hub. All right, on the left hand side, we have two rigid PCBs, which are basically rigid slabs. And on the right hand side, we have flexible PCBs, which are found in wearable devices, which are found in flexible connectors, and in any device which requires the PCB to be bent or flexed. All right, now I'm going to briefly go over two emerging topics in the PCB designing and manufacturing domain. So this is embedded component technology. Generally, we are making PCBs with surface mounting technology where the components are on either side of the board, either the top side or the bottom side. But in embedded component technology, we are going to have, we already have actually, we have the components inside the PCB laminate. Now, this has many advantages, one being reduction of board size, and the second being improving high speed properties of the PCB because it reduces the trace length. On the bottom, you can see a PCB with multiple layers of embedded components, and these embedded components can be passives or it can be active components. In case of active components, we can place the packaged IC, or even we can place the bare die itself. A similar domain is embedded optical interconnects. Now, with the advent of optical ICs, designers are exploring the possibility of processing and transmitting signal in the PCB in the optical domain compared to the copper or the electrical domain. So when we are transmitting signals through optical fibers and we are receiving the signal on a server or a data center, we need to convert it back to electrical domain, and that becomes a bottleneck in the signal transmission. So if we make optical interconnects inside PCBs, we won't need to convert optical to electrical and vice versa. We can do the processing as well as the transmission in the optical domain. I mean, of course, processing in the optical domain has certain drawbacks, but it is outside the scope of this video to explain those. So anyway, optical interconnects inside PCBs, that is also an emerging topic for PCB designers and manufacturers. All right, now let's come to the market end of things. In 2018, 2019, the entire electronic market in India was 140 billion USD, where the PCB market in India was only 2.63 billion USD. And fast forward to 2022, the market has risen to 4 to 5 billion USD. But the most important thing is that 65 to 80% of it is imported. Now, when you're going to low end PCBs like single layers and double layers, the import ratio is around 50%. But when you're going to HDIs and a bit high precision PCBs, the import ratio goes to 80% or even more. So this is an area where Indian manufacturers can improve, but the push has to come from the government and the support has to come from the government and building of the entire ecosystem. The manufacturers need a good supply chain and a good ecosystem to deliver their products, their high quality products at a lower cost and a competing cost. All right, so there are a few requirements for this growth. First is a pool of multi-talented manpower, reliable manpower. Um, and we don't have that in India because there's a mismatch between academic courses and the actual skill set required for a production industry, and also a lack of adequate number of training institutions. So the country has to start with setting up good quality training institutions and modifying academic courses to meet the industry requirements. The other point is that the Indian PCB manufacturers do not have the capability to manufacture PCBs for mobiles telecom. All it means is that they do not have the capability to manufacture high density interconnects, HDI boards, and high precision PCBs with micro VRs. And a primary reason for that is that the raw materials required for manufacturing a PCB, they are all imported. The laminates, the dry films, solder masks, copper balls, they're all imported from China or Far East countries. So once you import all of these products, already your cost increases. And after that, when you are designing and manufacturing the PCBs, you cannot possibly compete with countries where the raw material and supply chain, it's all very fluid. It's all inside the country, maybe even inside the same city, quote unquote Shenzhen. All right. Moving on to the next slide. Yeah, this gives you the chicken and egg problem. Basically, you can pause it and go over it, but I already described it in the previous slide. Now, coming to the job end of things. In India, in 2023-24, expected jobs in PCB design and manufacturing is only 56,000. And that, compared to all of the other fields, is the least. Even in semiconductor and components, it's 1,70,000. In security and surveillance, it's 1,85,000, and the others are off the charts. So, because of all the previous reasons which I mentioned, the jobs in PCB designing and manufacturing is very low, and also it does not pay well. People are not choosing PCB designing and manufacturing because it is a very unrewarding field. It's almost stagnant and it's quite unrewarding. These are a few qualifications required for design, manufacturing, and services. And someone who's going to design or either of these fields, you can pause this and go over this. To sum it all up, the entire hardware ecosystem needs raw material supply, a good production line, a good supply chain, and then most importantly, a pool of talented workers. And that comes from academia, that comes from training institutions. So that support needs to be there. Academia needs to adapt to the industry needs. Training institutions need to be set up, and hopefully that would give us a strong hardware production ecosystem. I mean, government is pushing for a semiconductor ecosystem. That is great, but if you're looking at the entire hardware production line, semiconductors aren't enough. You need domains like PCB, you need the raw material, and you need mechanical manufacturing, and you need a very solid supply chain. So with that, I will wrap up my video. I hope to see you in the next one. Thank you.